I don't need to tell any of you, you all know that all ICSs are expected to have an intelligence function to support them in analytically informed decision making at a system level. There's the NHS England's guidance is going to be published soon. I think we've already sent all of you, anybody who signed up to this session, you will have received the draft already. You'll have also received the draft of the toolkit that we have produced to support it. And you'll know that that intelligence function, the expectation is that it's system-wide, it's multidisciplinary across professions. It represents analytical leaders and key teams across the whole of the ICS, and it's expected it's going to be led by a chief analytical officer. You might not have seen, but we've actually produced a job description for that role. If anybody's interested in that, we can share with you, or it'll be put on the website at some point. So they're expected to have this chief analytical officer. They're also considered to work across the spectrum of strategic decision making, operational decision making and clinical decision making, and as you know, often there will be overlaps within that. It's not discrete, it is across that spectrum. And I've already mentioned this, we've built a toolkit to support the IF guidance, and we've tried to be incredibly practical in that toolkit, in describing how to make the most out of the different types of analysis in support of your priorities, providing a set of top tips to get you started and some principles to guide your planning, recognising you're all at different stages. Some of you will have been working in this area for a while, others will be coming to it brand new. And you'll be providing a set of resources that can help you in the planning and delivering of that function. And then the purpose of today is sharing one of the 10 case studies that we've described in the toolkit. So today's your chance to talk about the Midlands Decision Support Network. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Simon.
Brilliant. Thank you, Karen. Thanks for that lovely introduction, and welcome everyone. I know a fair few people on the call, so hello to the people I know, and nice to meet you, the people that I don't. What I'm going to do is I'll spend a bit of time talking to you about the Midlands Decision Support Network, just giving you a bit of an overview of what it is, what we do, and maybe a bit of insight into some of the challenges that we've faced over the last couple of years and how we've tried to overcome those. But then I'll be bringing in my lovely colleague Lucy Heath, who is waving at you there, who's the director of the Black Country Academy, which is one of the 11 systems who are part of the network. So you'll get the overarching network view, and then you'll get a view from one of those particular systems as well. And then we'll have lots of time for questions as well at the end. Feel free, as Karen says in the chat box, just drop those questions in as you go, as they come to you. They won't distract me. I won't answer them there and then, and Karen will curate them as we go through. So really broadly, and some of you will know this already, but I'm going to assume no knowledge. So the Midlands Decision Support Network essentially consists of 11 ICSs that make up the Midlands region. And as you know, each ICS needs to develop its intelligence function. But the Midlands made a decision a couple of years back that it would come together and form a network of all of those 11 systems who are trying to develop intelligence functions, and they would come together to form this network called the Midlands Decision Support Network. And part of that is around really recognising the benefits of operating at scale and sharing learning. So, you know, if all of these 11 systems are going on a similar journey, there's potential for if someone does a great piece of work in the Black Country, for example, then it might be of interest or of use in Nottinghamshire. If there's a piece of work that, you know, analytical code that's been produced in Northamptonshire, why couldn't it be potentially replicated in somewhere like Staffordshire? So there's all those benefits of reducing duplication and of sharing knowledge. But there's also a benefit around pooling resources, and that's what the systems decided to do. So they decided to put some some money together and essentially fund a development centre, which is run by the strategy unit that I lead, and working with our partners in OHID as well. So that's what was Public Health England. We work with their local knowledge and intelligence service, and actually have had a couple of members of the LKIS team seconded into our team to help us deliver this. So I'll say a bit more about what it is we do. Really broadly, you can put it into three main buckets of activity. One is quite a significant programme of training and development, which is about supporting people across the region to develop their skills for strategic decision making. One is a programme of analysis where we do work once on behalf of all 11 systems on stuff that's relevant to them all. And another is around essentially helping those local systems to share their learning and their knowledge with one another. And then we also try and add a bit of extra value in terms of trying to essentially attract investment into the region and run pilots at scale, taking advantage of the fact that this network represents about, I think it's about 20%, about a quarter of the NHS. I think there's 42 ICSs, so roughly a quarter. I'll go into each of those in a bit more detail. So the training and development side, led by my colleague Mohammed and supported by Rachel, who's on the call, it is really broadly about supporting local systems to develop their competencies for strategic decision making. And you can think of that as four main bits. Part of it is about building analytical capability, so helping analysts to develop skills in R, in various sort of technical methods, the various things that make up PHM around, segmentation and impactability, and that's one part of it, but it's not the whole thing. There's a really significant element around leadership development for analysts. So we're really firmly of the view that helping analysts to move into more board-facing roles where they're working really closely with decision makers to help shape up the questions is really important. So part of what we're doing is leadership development for analysts as well. But we also recognise that this isn't just about building analytical leadership and technical capability. It's also about getting the decision makers on board as well. So we do a fair bit around helping leaders to non-analytical leaders to develop understanding of analytical concepts, to give them decision-making frameworks, really to build their ability to draw on analysis when they're making decisions. And there's also a fair few other bits as well around that we deliver around evaluation, around evidence review training, really in recognition that the sort of evidence that we want to be informing decisions isn't just the quantitative, it's the qualitative stuff as well. Few things other to mention. Some of you on the call may have joined our annual Insight Festival, which is a couple of weeks of events aimed at health and care staff across the Midlands region, but nationally, and it's had some great speakers in the past, Michael Marmot and the chief execs of all the main think tanks. But I think something that I really wanted to emphasise here is that this is open to all of health and care. It isn't just for the NHS. We've taken a really strong decision from the start that this should be open to public health. It should be open to people from local authorities as well. And it's really started to help build some of the relationships between local authority and between public health analysts and their NHS counterparts. To move on, just our regional analytical programme. So the point of this is that there is stuff that matters to all of the systems in our region. Big major strategic projects where which maybe haven't received sufficient attention or people haven't had the capacity to work on themselves. So we in the strategy unit do 3 major projects a year, once on behalf of all 11 systems, share the code, help them to sort of think about how they might take it forward as well. So afterwards I'll share a list of some of those, and you can have with some links, and you can have a look a bit more detailed. But the sort of things we've been working on, looking at inequalities in access to planned care, looking at children and young people's mental health services. We've got a report that's coming out in the next couple of weeks, which is around strategies for addressing inequality in planned care. But I think something that's quite important, and sorry, I should mention as well, all these questions are identified and prioritised by our local systems. So essentially, it's the intelligence function leads working with the chief executives of the ICSs who propose these questions. They vote on them, and then we do them on their behalf. There's quite a significant point I wanted to make, though, was around essentially, it's not just about us doing analysis for local systems. It's really, we've put in place an arrangement where we're helping them to take forward the findings, and so we're helping them to shape the work over the course of its delivery, and we're helping them to reflect on the findings in the right forums, and we're helping them to think about how they take them forward. And Karen actually leads our Insight to Action offer. Yeah, so it's quite important that that this stuff gets applied, and that's so we've focused a lot of resource on that. A third of those buckets is around that I mentioned was around promoting knowledge exchange between systems. So we run a number of communities of practice. The biggest is our Midlands Analyst Network, which has fortnightly huddles, and I know quite a few people on the call are members of, and that has fortnightly huddles, which are educational, and has, oh, round of applause, thank you, Andrew. And we have equivalents for evaluation and evidence review as well. And we've also recently started one for the analytical leaders for each system, so the chief analyst. And again, just like the education programme, this is not just for NHS, this is public health and local authorities as well. We are increasingly leading projects that help the systems in the region to collaborate. So we're looking this year to run some shared evaluations, to run some shared R&D projects as well. And we've produced and developed various sort of pieces of guidance and standards on behalf of the network as well. And I'll just flash those up for a second here. But for example, we've done a guide to evaluation, some guides to evidence review and knowledge mobilisation that our local systems have found useful. Last thing I wanted to say was just around some of the value we add through coordinating this thing. So, as I say, it's about 20% of the NHS, maybe a little more. And so what it's meant is we've been able to sort of attract a decent bit of investment from the sort of national team and from other organisations in order to essentially pilot things at scale, so try analytical approaches at scale, and share some of the learning from that. So we've been working with the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services around developing a system dynamics model for domiciliary care. We've been working with the HFMA around running a STAR programme, so that's socio-technical allocation of resources programme for 4 of the systems in the region. And we're also working with, we're building partnerships with others who are interested and support this work, like, fantastic work that AFA have been doing around analyst career pathways that we've had some input into as well. So I just want to talk a little bit about some of the big challenges, because it's definitely not all smooth sailing. I think one of, when we first started, it was really clear that the analysts across the region were massively behind this, were so keen to be connected to one another, to have opportunities for development, a real sense that maybe they weren't sort of connected in the way that they wanted to be, and there was a real sort of appetite from this workforce to come together. But we needed to make it clear that this wasn't, that decision making is more than, it requires not just better analysis and better connection between analytics, but also it needs the decision makers to be brought in as well. So I think one of the things that we've spent a lot of time this year on doing, as I mentioned earlier, is really trying to put in place offers for the most senior leaders in systems, so the exec side, One thing that we're running this year is we're bringing together all the ICS chief execs in a few months to get them thinking about decision quality and how they make the best use of analysis in their system. And that would have been unimaginable a couple of years ago. So being able to bring those people along with us, I think, has been really important. I think another thing that's really important and is a challenge that we often get is that people might feel that this is very much an NHS focused initiative, and I think there is still plenty more work that we can do, but I think one of the things that's been really important to us has been seconding colleagues from the local knowledge and intelligence service into our team. We've spent a lot of time and energy in terms of engaging people from outside the NHS, and we've done a few pieces of shared work with the Association of Directors of Adult Social Services and working with some of our DPHs, which I think has helped to sort of build a bit of trust and build a bit of more of a sense that we're doing this for more than just the NHS. Another challenge that we've faced and we haven't necessarily overcome is around trying to progress this work against the backdrop of COVID. I think everyone we've worked with has recognised this benefit to greater collaboration across the region, but actually, obviously the operational pressures of dealing with COVID have sometimes meant that it's been hard to progress some of this stuff. I think I and many others across the region kind of wish that we'd come together a few years earlier, and that maybe we'd have had this arrangement more mature when COVID did hit, because I think we had some great sharing and learning from one another across the region during the COVID pandemic in terms of sharing approaches. But if it had been more established, I think we could have got a lot more out of it. So that's a challenge. And then I guess the last thing I wanted to highlight was just around the challenge of different systems progressing at different rates. So some systems have managed to develop a very sort of well-established arrangement, are producing great quality work. Others are still very much in the foothills and starting to build their analytical networks. And so I think part of what we've had to do is provide a baseline offer that everyone can access and start to sort of try and tailor it a little bit more to local systems needs as well. So I'm going to stop rattling on at you because I'm getting bored of my own voice. I just wanted to highlight some stuff on our website that you might want to have a look at. It's there, midlandsdecisionsupport.nhs.uk. That's got our various analytical reports on it. It's got various bits of our training and events that you can access if you work in the Midlands region. It's got all the recordings from our Insight Festival, which are, obviously I would say this, but they're great and really interesting. And if you're interested in decision making and health and care, then I would navigate your way over to those. It's got information about all of our professional networks. Again, if you work in the Midlands region, connect to those. The Midlands Analyst Network we open more widely to anyone across nationally, because there's those educational huddles. So feel free to join that if you're interested. And then there's our various guidance documents as well, which again, they're generally applicable. Our guide to evaluation has been recommended by the Health Foundation and is useful to anyone who's thinking about how they evaluate in their local system. And follow us on Twitter. We'd like more followers. So at Midlands DSN, that would be good. Anyway, right, that's enough from me. Contact me if you like, drop me an email there. I'm going to mix it up a little bit now and speak to my friend and colleague, Lucy Heath. So Lucy leads one of our 11 system arrangements in the Black Country, and we thought it might be nice to do this like a bit of an interview, and so we'll just have a conversation, and maybe it'll spark some questions or extra reflections from you that you can put in the chat box. So Lucy, welcome. Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell me just a little bit about the Black Country Academy, please?
Yes, of course. Thank you, Simon, for inviting me to join today. Yeah, so the Black Country Academy, we started development work in August 2020. So we've been going for nearly 2 years now. But back in August 2020, the Academy team was just me. That's grown over that time, and we now have 7 core team members and then 8 joint posts with both business intelligence and information governance. And then we have 4 clinical leads as well as our core team. We've also established a strategy board and advisory board, and they're described briefly in the case study in the intelligence function toolkit. So we developed a strategy back in April and described our purpose as making choices matter for the health and well-being of the people of the Black Country and West Birmingham. And I think that shows the kind of focus we want to have on decision quality at all levels, so individual, neighbourhood, place and system. And all that is described in our Academy strategy, which I'm more than happy to share with anybody if they want that level of detail. And really, we've kind of organised our work in 4 areas. So looking at generating our own actionable intelligence, generally in response to requests that have come from our ICS boards. So, for example, our Learning Disability and Autism board wanted some support around their autism development strategy, and we did a big autism needs assessment around that. So that's be an example. Moving existing pieces of intelligence to action. So Simon shared before the pieces of analysis we get through the Midlands Decision Support Network, and the system has actually commissioned a number of other pieces of analysis prior to the Decision Support Network starting, but there hasn't been any action around that. So I've been really focusing on how we can take those bits of insight and think about how we kind of use those to really frame the problems we want to solve, and ideally trying to move those problems to identifying solutions and moving us to action. We've been looking at pieces of valuation. So over time, that will become the pieces of work that we've kind of moved through a process, but there's lots of innovations that have been introduced into the system that require that evaluation, or the kind of consultancy around how to do that evaluation well. And then the 4th area is how we've been developing our enabling infrastructure, so things like inputting into the development of our shared care record and making sure that's available for population health management, making sure that we've got kind of appropriate IG in place, starting to develop our own local networks. And again, details of all that work is described in our annual report if anybody wants a copy of that.
Brilliant. Thanks, Lucy. And so obviously people will have been looking at the case studies in that intelligence toolkit, but could you tell me something that wouldn't feature in that case study? So, you know, what have been the big challenges that you faced in trying to do this?
So I think, as I said before, and you talked about earlier, Simon, we've kind of been working together on this kind of insight to action approach, and I think that has been really challenging. I think I kind of started in this post, and even before other members of the team started in place, we thought, oh, we've got all these good bits of insight, let's try and do something effective with them. And I think we had quite a good approach. So we took each piece of insight to a key board in the system to try and get that ownership. We worked with them to identify a multidisciplinary team working group that could come together and review the insight and think about what they do next, and planned a series of workshops. And we had a lot of support from the strategy unit around this, kind of facilitating those. But I think one of the things we kind of learned quite quickly is, even though you've got a really good bit of insight, that doesn't necessarily mean you know what the actions should be. And the further kind of intelligence and insight you need isn't just quantitative. So we had lots of kind of why questions as a result of those. So we've been looking at things like the physical health of people with serious mental illness, the resource use in the last 2 years of life, the inequalities in planned care that Simon mentioned before, inequalities in children and young people's mental health access, and the classification of outpatients attendances. But yeah, I said we quickly learned that quantitative analysis alone wasn't going to help us define those problems effectively or decide how to take action. And I think that was probably the biggest challenge, because the other skills aren't that plentiful in the system.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. And so, and I just wondered if you want to say anything more about the strategies you've taken to overcome some of those challenges and the approaches you've employed. Did you want to build on that a bit more?
Yeah, so I think those challenges really informed the design of the academy team. So as part of the team, I've recruited leads around evaluation, knowledge management and qualitative insight to ensure that we do have those skills and to be able to bring those other types of intelligence into our decision making. And again, we've been looking at developing networks. So developing an analyst network, it feels quite obvious where the analysts are in our system. And although it's not necessarily so obvious where people with knowledge management skills or people with qualitative skills or evaluation skills are, we've started to try and identify people who've either got these skills or are keen to develop those skills in our system, and starting from a fairly small baseline, starting to develop networks to bring those people together, one, to make them more visible, and two, to kind of support their learning and development. So those are the kind of strategies that we're doing. I think that probably the other side is taking the work that we've been doing back to leads in the system so that they can start to see the benefits of these different types of intelligence. So again, they don't always assume that the only way to answer a kind of question about what we should do differently is quantitative analysis, and they're starting to think about other forms of intelligence that can support that. And yeah, the demand for the kind of support we can offer is increasing as a result of people starting to see that. So yeah, it's that combination probably of what you were talking about before, Simon, of supporting developing those skills within the system, but also supporting system leaders to recognise that they need those skills to be able to make decisions.
Fabulous, thanks. That's really useful insight there. So, and last question from me, and then maybe we'll open it up to wider people. But if you were able to get in your time machine and go back to see Lucy Heath of a couple of years ago when you were starting out on this journey, and you could give some advice to your younger self, what might it be?
Oh, okay. I think there'd be something around commitment to action at the beginning of the project. I think since I've started 2 years ago, the context's been really challenging. So the NHS's real focus has been on how we manage the direct and indirect effects of COVID and how we recover that lost ground, and also the governance of moving from the CCG to the ICB and becoming an established ICS. So I think that's really meant that the headspace to focus on more proactive rather than reactive approaches has been really limited.
Yeah.
And therefore, I think I could have done a lot more to try and frame the areas that we were thinking were our priority areas as part of the solution to recovering that lost ground. I think there's a real case to be made that return to business as usual isn't possible, and we really need to do something different and proactive if we're going to actually restore the NHS and get back to where we get to a place we'd like to be. And I think it's challenging to get time with our system leaders, or for them to feel that they've got the time to kind of do that thinking that's needed to be able to not just kind of go for the usual solutions, for example, for addressing elective waiting lists, but actually think about something different. Yeah, and I think if I'd put more effort into that at the beginning, then we might make more progress.
Okay, but still, no, I agree with your point there, Lucy, and also this question about what do we want to return to? You know, we know that we know that there's masses of in terms of access to services before the pandemic, and that's only worsened. So we do need to ask ourselves. You know, there is a positive spin where this can force us to think about what's the next iteration of the NHS looks like. What do we do as we try and recover to try and make sure we don't make all of those inequalities worse inadvertently?
Now, one of the things that we've been doing for a couple of years is we have a PCN development programme, and talking to one of our PCN clinical directors last week, and he was just saying that going through that programme made him realise that in kind of trying to restore things from COVID, there's no point. He doesn't want to get back to business as usual. That's not his goal. He wants to kind of get to a new state, which is different. And but he's taken the time. He's found the time to have that headspace to think. And I think that's a challenge for a lot of our system leaders is, where does that headspace come from when there's so much to react to?